Hello, I'm Mark Newton from the School of Photography, and I've got the pleasure of working with the Amateur Photographer magazine on their Amateur Photographer of the Year 2025 awards. There are 10 rounds in the awards, and in each round I'm going to give you my free top tips to inspire you and hopefully help you get great pictures. Round 8 is movement. The first tip I'm going to give you here is light trails. Now, light trail photography is a great technique to capture movement and energy of moving vehicles. So let's start off with some essential equipment that you're going to need to create light trail photography. One is a tripod, because you need to keep your camera still during the longer exposure. You're going to need to use a remote shutter release, because that will enable you to fire off the camera without touching it. And an optional piece of equipment would be an ultra wide angle lens. Now, this is optional because they cost money, but an ultra wide angle lens basically goes beyond your average wide angle from your kit lens, and it enables you to capture a lot more of the scene should you want to. The next thing that you want to consider before taking light trail photography is your location that you're going to do it. So you're going to need to do some location scouting. Clearly, you're going to need to find a location where the traffic flows freely, and don't forget that safety comes first. Fast moving vehicles and photographers don't tend to mix, so make sure that location that you're choosing is safe. And here are some ideas for locations to do light trail photography. Urban environments work extremely well. Bridges and overpasses, they work really well as well. Winding roads through the countryside, if you can find them, they also work well. And anything with architectural interest or iconic buildings, those locations will also work well with light trail photography. Then think about the composition of your picture. Dynamic foregrounds work really well. That could be a person, parked car, street sign, reflection, anything like that can help anchor the scene. Another compositional technique you might want to use is leading lines. You can use anything in your scene to lead your eye through the frame, including the light trails themselves. Diagonals in this type of photography work really well because they create dynamism and help lead the viewer's eye through the image. Another good compositional technique in this type of photography is symmetry. If you can find that, that will give a lovely balanced feel to the image and enhance its aesthetics. Let's talk about camera settings for this type of photography. Now, it obviously is specific to the camera that you're using and the location you're in, the light you've got available, etc. But there are some general settings that you can start with. And the first one of them is to shoot in manual mode. You're going to need to shoot fully manual for this type of photography. You're going to want to choose a small f number, small aperture, because that will give you a long depth of field and enable the streaks and the scene to be sharp from the foreground to the background. Your shutter speed is going to be dictated by the time it takes the vehicle to move through your scene. So if you've got a vehicle that takes 4 seconds to go from the start of your composition to the end of your composition, then you will base your shutter speed around 4 seconds. And then on top of that, you're going to want to keep your ISO as low as possible, and that will give you a clean, sharp, vibrant image. When it comes to white balance, it's very difficult because you've got lots of different types of lights going on. So I find that just putting it into auto white balance gives you a general baseline that you can use while you're shooting. And then when you get back into editing, you can change and adjust from there. The next thing is your focusing. Now, in general, with this type of photography, you will focus into infinity and you will lock the focus off there. You're also going to need to shoot in RAW because that will give you the most detail and the most dynamic range that you're going to need when you get back to editing. Don't forget, you're generally shooting very contrasty situations. So you're going to need to pull them highlights down, push them shadows up, and a RAW file is what you need for that. And then I would suggest bracketing the shots as well. Now, I know that you're not going to be bracketing exactly the same picture because these are moving things, but it will just give you different options when you get back into post-processing. Because it's a contrasty scene and you're viewing it on a very small screen like this, it's always best to get a few different exposures just to make sure that you've got a correct one when you get back into editing. Now, if that's all really confusing for you, I actually have a whole YouTube video which is in depth on photographing light trails. Just go onto our YouTube channel, the School of Photography, and then scroll down and you'll find it under photography tutorials. My next tip is panning. Now, panning is a technique where you move your camera at the same speed as the moving object. And what that does is that keeps the moving object still within your frame and the background blurs. And basically that means that things look fast and dynamic. Now, it's not an easy technique to get right first time. It takes practice, so just remember that. And if you've got a flash gun, have some fun with it by adding a burst of flash whilst you're panning. That is a technique called slow sync flash. And of course, if you want to learn panning, shutter speed, slow sync flash, etc., we cover that all in depth in my beginner's photography course over at the School of Photography. My next tip is shutter speeds versus movement. Now, of course, shutter speed controls movement in an image, but movement also controls the way that you use shutter speeds within your camera. And them two things need to be in synergy to get effective results. Now, what I mean by that is, let's take the panning technique that I was talking about earlier. If you've got a slow moving subject, then you will use a slower shutter speed, maybe 1/4 of a second or 1/8 of a second. If you've got a fast moving subject like a car or bike, etc., you're going to need to up your shutter speed to 1/60th, 125th of a second to get a similar effect. And the fact is, you don't actually know that until you're in situ and practicing with different shutter speeds. And let's talk about clouds moving in the sky. You generally take a long exposure and you get them clouds streaking in the sky. Now, if the clouds are moving slowly, then you could be doing an exposure of 1 minute, 2 minutes plus to get the clouds streaking in the sky. If the clouds are moving really fast, you might only need a 15-second exposure. And then of course the rest of your settings, your aperture and your ISO is going to be dictated by the shutter speed that you need to set. So in this assignment of movement, understanding the relationship between the shutter speed in your camera and the movement of your objects is going to be key to getting effective results. Now, if you want to learn photography or editing, please come over and see us at theschoolofphotography.com and check out our online courses. There is a link in the description of this video which will take you there. Also, if you want to enter the Amateur Photographer of the Year award, there is a link in the description for that as well, and that will tell you all about the competition and prizes. Good luck. I'm Mark Newton, and remember, if you want to learn photography properly, come over and see us at theschoolofphotography.com.